Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this FP&A Trends Webinar, where today we're going to look at the latest trends and development in FP&A. Especially, we are going to talk about our 2024 Global Survey results. My name is Hans Gobin. I'll be your facilitator today. Just to give you a little bit of stats, we have over 350 participants joining us today from 56 countries around the world. So we are going to have a fantastic meeting. So what do we have in store for you today? So let me take you through what we're going to talk about. So first of all, we will look at the key findings of our survey. Then we will look at leveraging product management in finance for transformation. We will look at data-driven decision-making, history, cause, and direction, and then we'll look at conclusions and recommendation. And finally, what we do, as always, we'll look at our great Q&A session coming from our panelists and yourselves. So that's a bit of a summary as to what we're going to talk about today. Let me take this opportunity now to welcome my guests, my panelists. So Michael and Nick, if you can come on camera, please. And I want to introduce you next. Our first panelist today is Michael Huthwaite, who is Director of Product Management at the famous Walmart. Is based in Arkansas in the USA. And today Michael will be talking to us about leveraging product management in finance for transformation. Michael, it's with great pleasure that we welcome you on the panel today.
Hey Hans, hey everybody, thanks for having me today. Really excited to talk to you about the survey as well as product management as it relates to Walmart. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And of course, our second speaker today is Nick Verhoeven, who is Solutions Manager and Planning and Analytics at SAP. He's based in the Netherlands, Utrecht to be specific. And today he's going to look at data-driven decision-making, history, cause, and direction. Nick, very welcome to the panel today.
Thank you, Hans. Pleasure to be back.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got fantastic insight, fantastic presentation, and of course, insight from the survey coming out shortly. But for now, I'll ask our panelists to go on mute and go off the camera. I've got some housekeeping to do. So thank you for that. Now, let me start by saying a big thank you to our global sponsor, who today is SAP. We all know SAP very well. SAP is one of the world's leading providers of modern FP&A solutions. So thank you, SAP, for sponsoring us. A very quick update on FP&A Trends Group. As we know, we've been growing over the last few months last year, and we are now in 33 cities, 19 countries, and 4 continents. You would see that line at the bottom. Those are the cities that we've recently added to our FP&A International Board. So please do join us if you are in one of these cities and when we're having our meeting. And of course, we do a lot of FP&A insight through our FP&ATrends.com, the webinars which you are on, our LinkedIn group, and the digest. And finally, our FP&A Education, Research and Consulting, where we do best practice workshop, consultancy, AI, ML, FP&A committee is very well known, and the surveys and research, which you are all part of it. So this is how you guys can come and join us and talk to us about FP&A and what's been happening. Now, a bit of housekeeping. For those who don't know, the webinar is going to be an hour's webinar. We have 2 polling questions for you to answer, so please do participate and do tell us what you're doing in those spaces. We also have our fantastic Q&A session at the end. Please do ask a question. Do tell us who you want the questions to be answered. Do it via the chat box, please. You can start now if you have got any burning questions, if not, after the presentations. The presentations are available to download in the handout, so you can do that now. If you don't, you will still receive a copy as well as the recording after the meeting. And finally, when I close the session, there will be a brief survey at the end. So please spend 30 seconds to a minute, do answer those questions, tell us how we did, but also tell us what are the hot topics you would like us to discuss in the future. So that will be very, very welcome. Right, I want to introduce you to the FP&A Trends Survey a little bit, but also take you to some key findings as well. It is our 8th year of the FP&A Trends Survey, and you can see that the stats there. We've had over 2,400 respondents from around the world. Most of you would have participated as well, so thank you very much for doing that. This year's survey had 383 participants, and 59% were senior people in different businesses. You can see the breakdown there. You can see the breakdown of the organization as well as the geography there. You've got the link there, and towards the end, you've also got a barcode or a scan code to get the survey for yourself. And of course, if you don't, we will still send you a link after the meeting as well. So let us now deep dive a little bit into the key findings of the FP&A Trends Survey 2024. Now, this is a chart that we have been tracking for a while. It is where do FP&A spend most of their time. Amazingly, this has not changed over the years or changed very slightly. 35% of FP&A time only spent on high value activities. That is driving actions and insight generation. We're still spending far too much time on non-value add stuff. So data collection, data validation. We are going to go into a little bit more detail on this during the meeting with our panelists as well. So I'll leave that here for now. So just food for thought there for you people joining us today. Too much time still being spent on non-value add stuff. Our survey was split into 5 different categories, and I'd like to bring to you some of the stats that I believe is quite important. So data-driven decision making. 64% state that most decisions are made using data. That's fantastic news. It's up by 12%. However, 9% say low and poor data quality. That's down by 2%, which is a good set of stats as well. So if we are to make data-driven decision making, we have to have good stats. The second bit of finding comes around critical FP&A activities. So predictability span is to do with forecasting, as we well know. But what we found out during our survey is that 63% cannot predict beyond 6 months. So beyond 6 months, you can't really do forecasting. And for those who do good forecasting, you've got the stats there. 18% can forecast in less than 2 days. That is up by 2%. Good news again. 29% forecast in more than 10 days. 3% up, which is not great news. 10 days and beyond 10 days, that's 2 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks in the month. So the month is almost over then. Isn't the forecasting or the forecast produced almost out of date as well? Food for thought. Forecasting accuracy, 42% satisfied with their forecast, 2% up. So bit of optimism coming from there. Now, different planning methods, we talk about it all the time. People, 49% are using rolling forecast. This is up by 2%, which is fantastic news. But guess what? 45% still use figures plus a growth percentage, which is not the right way of planning. So opportunities there, people. Driver-based modeling, 9% transition fully to automated driver-based planning. So they are using fully automated driver-based planning. 21% plan and forecast 3 statement in an integrated manner. Very important, your cash flow, balance sheet, and P&L. Now, in the space of running scenarios, 22% run scenario in less than 1 day. 6% up, which is fantastic. However, 21% unable to run scenarios still. So That's 1% up as well, which is not really good news. We need to be able to react to what's happening out there and able to run our scenario as quickly as we can. And then final slide from me on planning applications, we still see 52% using Excel as a dominant planning tool. Despite, talking about enhancement, investment in FP&A technologies, the next one though, 40% have seen or received investment in technology, 52% are still using Excel for planning as their main tool. Not good news there. AI ML adoption, current use of AI ML is at 6%, so that's on a downward trend. We've got a bit of a discussion we're going to have in a bit on that as well. And finally, team performance. Team performance, 19% say they are optimized and performing well. Great news. 50% identify business partnering as their top skill when they're hiring. So business partnering is still one of the top skill being thought out by any recruiter at the moment, and that's up by 9%. So ladies and gents, that was a quick whirlwind tour from me on the key findings. I took a little bit longer than predicted, but I thought those were important to highlight and for you to look out for once you go through the survey itself. Now, without further ado, let me bring a question to our panelists. So panelists, if you can join me, please. We saw that stats earlier on. Why is FP&A still spending 45% of their time on non-value add activities? Michael, can I come to you with a bit of a discussion, please?
Yeah, great, Hans, and that was a great introduction. I think, obviously we'll get into the presentation and I'll kind of hit on a few more of these points. But I think really in order to get rid of the non-value activities, you really have to focus on outcomes and OKRs that will really drive out those non-value activities. So changing the customer behavior, changing your business user's behavior is key to actually changing how we do things. And so I think we just need to focus our outcomes on those and then strategize for what we deliver from a product side or from a delivery side to address those outcomes. So I think that's critical. I'll also talk a little bit about, as the level of data increases, right? We just have that much bigger of a hurdle to get over. So it's not like the number of data, the amount of data is staying constant, it's growing. And so even though we might be seeing some incremental improvements, we're dealing with more and more volume of data. So it becomes a challenge.
Thank you very much, Michael. Great insight there from you. Nick, your thought, please.
Yes, I think this is a very interesting statistic, right? Especially that it's stable over the last 3 years. And then if we want to figure out why is this happening, so 45% is a rather large number, right? So in the perfect world it would be 0, but we don't think that's realistic, but having something in the middle should be reachable. And if we think about it, why would this be happening? I just think of what I do myself, and I think it's very much human nature. So I have a problem, I need to solve that problem, and I know where I can get my information and data, so the validation and collection. It's not perfect, but I'll clear it out, I'll get it done, and I can get to work with it. But there's actually an issue with that can-do mentality in a way, where you don't rely on the larger organization, where we indicate there's a problem. This is apparently not an easy way to get this information. It's information that we're all using, and it would be much more efficient if we could harmonize that overall. But that delays my problem that I have at that point in time. And I think because of that direct action and not highlighting it to the larger organization, that we remain constant at this very high level of non-value adding activities.
Brilliant. Great insight from you there as well, Nick. So thank you very much. But of course, it is very important we tackle these issues because we want to be driving insight and driving action is what we are there for. So, and of course, the use of technology does help us to move that dial to a much more positive way. So thank you for your insight. Let us move now to our first presenter. And as mentioned before, our first presenter is Michael Huthwaite, Director of Product Management at Walmart. And today he will talk to us about leveraging product management in finance for transformative organizational growth. So over to you, Michael, whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Great, Hans. Thanks again. Appreciate it. So let's jump to the next slide. So I won't spend really any time talking about Walmart. I think everyone sort of knows, what Walmart is, how big it is, not only in the U.S., across our Walmart U.S. stores and our Sam's Club stores or clubs, but also throughout the international landscape and in many countries. I think the one thing we all know at Walmart is we operate at scale, and we operate with big numbers and big scale. So some of the problems you'll see obviously come about quicker and faster with us. But what I really want to talk about today is a journey we embarked on about 2 years ago, and that was to take a product management mindset. So when you think about product management, you typically think about, oh, that's something that a product organization or like a software company would embark on. But actually, that's exactly the approach we took. So we're talking about our FP&A technology, right? So these are products we're not selling, right? We're not selling them out into the real world, but the way we're developing them and thinking about them, we're taking that customer-centric approach in building that out. And so that's the journey we've been on for the last 2 years. My challenge coming into this, I run a team of product managers, and we develop dashboards. We have about 35 managerial dashboards focusing on sales, P&L reports, and we have all the same problems that are in the survey, right? Multiple versions of the truth, non-conforming data sets, costly maintenance, and then just long development time. So those are some of the same challenges we were encountering as we embarked on this journey. And I just conclude here on this intro slide with my learnings, right? And that is something I said a little earlier, is as data grows and we've seen the interest in data and the data usage grows, things become more complex, more difficult. So even though Walmart's a very big organization and we're kind of leading the way maybe on some of those challenges, those are going to be common challenges to everyone who's facing expansion in data and data availability. So with that, let's jump into the next slide, and I want to kind of go through some of the key findings. Hans really ran through this pretty well. But I want to tell you that as I read this, I want to tell you how I thought about it. So the first thing is we focus on the data side. Great news is, right, 64% of people say that they make data-driven decisions. That's great. The challenge is that there's data quality issues, timeliness, single version of the truth issues. So I challenge everyone to say, how should we think about data? That's the question I'll have. That's the product management question I'll have, and I'll go into that in more detail. On the business partnering side, it's great. Everyone, 50% recognize that partnering is a top skill. That's really, really great. But only 19% recognize that they're really optimized. So again, putting my product management lens on, how can we work better together as a team will be what I'll address. And then thirdly, as we look at the rate of change, and I think Hans highlighted this as well, there has been areas, especially in the time spent category, with very little change over the last 3 or 4 years. So the time spent driving action, unfortunately, hasn't changed much or at all. Time spent generating insights, again, has been really constant. And then gathering and validating data, which is really the non-value add work, that actually rose by 2% over the last 4 years. So how do we create product value is essentially the question I'm going to propose to you guys today. So with that, let's jump into that first question. So if we can jump over to the next slide. Okay, so I challenge you to take a thought about data, and we're going to go down the first path first. So data as an asset. Most people think about data as an asset. So I challenge you, just take a second, think about an asset. Just put something in your mind. A general asset can be tangible, intangible. As finance folks, I'm sure you obviously very versed on what assets are. So just put an asset in your mind. I'm going to just use a piece of land as my asset. So when you think about that, the approach you take to data as an asset is that the asset's more or less a commodity. It's very general, very generalized. That's typically where you see most of your assets. If you think about the audience that represents, it's very broad, very non-specific. You want to keep it as generic as possible so it can be used by as many people as possible. When you think about creating additional value in the value chain, you're thinking about kind of cleaning that up and grooming that asset, and that's typically how you create value. So again, in my case of land, it might be mowing the lawn or flattening the ground. In data, obviously, you're normalizing the data, standardizing it, cleaning it up a little bit. That's how you're creating value in an asset world. When you think about validation, you're thinking about, does it tie to the source system? That's typically the main validation. And then the good news about having data as an asset is that when it comes to maintaining it, it's relatively low. You can have many assets. Your data warehouse probably has lots of tables in there, and you can maintain a pretty high number of tables. And so I personally think someone who's managing that is taking sort of an asset manager approach to working with data. Now, on the flip side, and this is part of our journey, is we sort of challenge ourselves to take a look at data as a product. So again, an internal product, so not necessarily something that we're trying to sell, but just data as a product. So in my mind, I'm going to think of something like a mobile phone or an iPhone or something. It's very important to make a brand focused. So rather than just have it be a very vague table of data, give it a brand name, give it something that has a name that you can run with. Make sure when you're working with your audience that you have specific audiences and personas that you're developing for. When you do that, you'll streamline activity. And actually what you'll find as being a product manager is you're actually able to connect multiple user groups together. You're essentially able to find market share, right, within your space. So you're getting more and more people accessing your existing products by adding very little additional capability. You're essentially creating market share for your product. When you think about things like validation, it's no longer good enough to just tie to the source, right? You need to meet an SLA, right? Those are things like, was it delivered on time? If I need it at 4:30 in the morning, or if I need it on a certain date, did that arrive on time? Did it meet the thresholds that I'm expecting? So was it within a certain number that we would expect the number to be? If not, why not? What are you doing to support that data as a product? So if it goes down, what's your time frame to resolve? That's treating data as a product by providing SLA. Now, the downside to treating data as a product is that the maintenance is higher. And the only way to make it work is to combine audiences together on limited products. You can build a data product that essentially fails because you just don't have the audience to use that data product, and the cost is just too high. Your job in building a data product is making sure that you build a great data product where lots of users want to use that and rally around that. That's when you really become a product manager of your data. So I think that's a very, very insightful approach that we've taken to try to think about data and remove some of those, multi versions of the truth and, unconformed data and many of the issues that the survey has talked about, but we've also seen as well. So if we jump to the next slide, I want to tackle a second question. And the second question was really around, how can we work better together? I think the pulling data, again, business partnering is very important, but are we optimized to do that? So when we think about that, we think about two factors that tug on each other. And that is a short-term versus long-term perspective. So I need everything now versus I want to build some value over time. That's one of the key things. The other thing is what we just call supply and demand. So I need this now, I want this is what I want, versus this is what I can give you, this is what we have, this is what's sustainable. And when you map that out in this graph, you really get one of the critical elements of product management, which is what's called a 4-in-the-box methodology. And when you think about that, you look at the customer box in the upper left, right? Their job in coming together and working together to build great products is to focus on what are my short-term pain points and needs. That's what they focus on. That's what they provide insight into, and that's what that's their value prop in this situation. They tell us where their pain points are, what's not working. They also tell us what good would look like. And then moving to the right, that's where my team partners in. We have that same hyper awareness of the problem and of what's needed, but we take a bit of a longer term view. So we try to stretch that out and figure out how can we build a long-term sustainable product. That's the conversation there. That's the tug of war, if you will, between the customer and the product, is how can we build a more long-term value add product that will do all those things most efficiently and build durable products. And then we interact very much with our development team, who again, we share that same long-term value, but they're focused more on the supply side. So what can I give you in that time frame? What resources do we have available to give you that time, that product? And that's where the conversation is there. The very last one, which is probably the most nebulous one, but I'll just point to it, is what we call the certifier box. And that's really in a data conversation. That's somebody like a data steward, somebody who's validating the data. They're focused on what is there today and what's available. So they're in that short-term supply box. If this product ends up being something like a visualization and the data is already provided and it's more visual, then typically it won't be a data steward. It'll be more like a UX person. So that's classically what you see in a common form in the box is a UX box there. But when you meet together regularly as a team, with each team member pushing for their angle and making their voice heard, you build products that are sustainable, that meet customer needs, and just essentially work better for long periods of time. And we have used this methodology time in and time out to solve many of the conversation problems we have, many of the teamwork problems that we have. So it's a very good technique to use. So the last question I want to go to, if we go to the next slide, please, was around that traction. So, are we creating value? We saw that, the run rate wasn't amazing. Things weren't changing very much. There's just a couple things I would throw out with that product management mindset that we use to try to move that traction and that trust. The first thing is we don't lead with outputs. Outputs are the things you're developing, the things you're going after. Instead, what we lead with or we push for is outcomes. So if your outcome is to get off of Excel or reduce Excel by 80% or whatever that percentage needs to be, that's the behavior, that's the customer behavior that you're driving, and you're managing and monitoring to that outcome. Then it becomes a question of what outputs do I need to give to move that needle and to manage that process over time. That means you don't just ship a bunch of product or a bunch of new features or a bunch of content. You're very cautious as to what you're producing, when you're producing, because you're really focused on the consumer customer behavior trends that are changing that you're trying to manage to a certain direction. So you get out of I need this feature and I need this feature on X date, and it's more about moving those outcomes, which everyone in that 4 in the box can rally around and agree that those are the outcomes we're trying to drive. A very obvious one, but is just to group all of your problem statements and pain points together. When you do that, that really helps you identify how many products do I really have in my FP&A space. You could say I have a planning product, but if you have distinct audiences using it for different purposes, you may find that you have actually several different products there that you need to cater to, have different conversations for, and address their concerns. So it's trying to bring them all together so you understand how many products do I really have, be very crisp on those products that you're managing, and be very crisp on who's using those, who your stakeholders are, and be very hesitant or very deliberate when you greenlight another product on your team so that you know and you can manage that out. And the very last one here is just some key things to track. And again, at Walmart, obviously everything at Walmart's big and so we work at scale. But even if you're small, to start with these key elements to track is very critical. So those are things like usage. Are people using my product? What is their user patterns? Are they going from this to that? Could those two things be in the same place? Could they look the same? You get a lot of information from usage. TCO, otherwise known as total cost of ownership. So what is the cost of that product? It's not just the subscription software I'm paying for. It's not just the SaaS cost. It's also maybe potentially additional cloud costs, labor costs, maintenance costs. It's a host of other costs. What is that cost by product so that you can manage that? One of the key things for a product manager to manage is their P&L for their product. So total cost of ownership is important. Then some obvious things like defects and issues, requests by product, so you understand kind of what your roadmap looks like, what your intake is, what people are asking for, where are your issues, where are your pain points. And then lastly, ratings. You see them on websites all the time. Is this a 5-star product? Is it a 4-star product? Manage to shoot for 5-star products. If your product is not a 5-star, why is it not a 5-star? Those are really great ways to really elevate your product value and solve some of the pain points we're talking about in this survey. So Hans, with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Brilliant, brilliant, Michael. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you for taking us through how you look at data as a product and how the different product lines, etc., is such. But much more importantly, how you're driving all of these stats to a positive within your organization. So that's amazing. So thank you very much for that. What I want to do now is to go to a polling question and learn a little bit more about what our audience and our FP&A members are doing. We talked about FP&A business partnering there, but what we want to do is to find out, are our members using an integrated FP&A business partnering? So where are you on that journey? First is, yes, we run an integrated FP&A business partnering model. Second, we do plan to implement one in the future. And the third one is that there's no plan for any FP&A business partnering model in our organization as well. So please, if you can vote, where would you say your organization is on the integrated FP&A business partnering journey? Yes, we run such a model. 1, 2, we do plan to implement such a structure, and third, no plans to implement any such structure. So I am now going to close the voting and I'm going to share the results. And 44% say, yes, we do run an FP&A integrated business model, which is fantastic. 34% say we do plan to implement, and 22% say we have no plans. Michael, can I have a very quick insight from you on this?
Yeah, and I think this is great, and nothing's better than live polling. And I think when you add the first 1 and 2 together, you obviously understand that business partnering is a critical element. That supports the survey that was run that indicates the same. So I'm very excited to see that. I do think, you know, supporting the customer and supporting your partners is critical, and obviously love to see that continue. I do sense that there's probably some challenges that go along with doing this really, really well, and hopefully some of the things I mentioned today can help with that process.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Michael. Let me now hide this and let us bring our panelists together to answer this question. So Michael, do come back, as well as Nick. So very quickly, guys, we don't have much time for this one. Why do only 22% of organizations have a single source of data with an agreed taxonomy? We talked about this earlier, Michael, but Nick, can I ask you to go first? Quick answer, please.
Definitely. So I would say single source of data, single source of truth. There might even be some word fatigue in there, right? We've been hearing this even before data warehousing became to be popular. I think it is all in the semantics of what does a single source of data actually mean in an agreed taxonomy, and I think you take it bit by bit, just like what Michael was describing, right? You take a single product, you make that to that level that it's worthwhile and really a single source for a certain group, and that's how you build it up. So I think 100% score is unattainable in that sense.
Brilliant. Michael?
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, obviously it's tough, right? It's tough to have a single source of data. You have to be very deliberate. You have to be very planned out. You have to use the right tools that integrate with each other and the right strategies. So it's tough, but it all starts with desire and figuring out what is that outcome that you're trying to drive. And it's a challenge that we're all still and will continue to work with as we evolve.
Absolutely. I think it's aspiring to get to that point that is important, and removing most of the different sources of data you have as well. So thank you very much for your insight and answering these questions. So before we move to our next presentation, I would just like to remind the audience that please do ask your question. Send us your question via the chat box. We will answer a lot of your questions today. So please keep doing that. Without further ado, let's go to our second presenter, who is Nick, and a solutions manager and planning and analytics at SAP. And today he's going to talk to us about data-driven decision-making, history, cause, and direction. Over to you, Nick. Nick, I think you've gone on mute for some reason. Nick, can you hear me? Nick,
there we are back.
you're back. Can you start again, please?
Yes, apologies for that. I'm not sure why, but audio was disconnected. So what are we going to do? We're going to dive into the history of data-driven decision-making. And what you see on the screen right here is actually a lovely chart created in the 1800s. It was created by one of the lead medics at the time. Her name was Florence Nightingale. One of the lesser known facts is that she was also a great statistician. And what you see here on the screen is a nice chart indicating the cause of mortality in battle back in the day, in the 1800s that is. And actually what she found by going from bed to bed and collecting all of that data, she found that mortality was not found in battle, but actually mortality was found due to hygienic reasons in all of the hospitals. And based on that, the military staff changed the way they operated and had much more focus on the hygiene as opposed to the battle itself, thus preventing these preventable cases of mortality. So a great example, and that to me is really what data-driven decision-making is all about. But where are we today? So on the next slide, of course, we've come quite a long way since the days of Florence. And we even saw a very positive surge in the FP&A Trends Survey, where there's a 12% rise, now having 64% of the respondents saying they conduct data-driven decision-making. So starting on a very positive note. On the slightly less positive note, we did find that still the main barrier to data-driven decision-making is data quality, one of the toughest nuts to crack in this example. So that's something I'll be diving into. But still, another positive one is that only 21% indicated that culture was limiting data-driven decision-making. And that's very positive, because if the culture is not there, nothing will happen. You need everyone to be motivated to move in this direction. Then a final one, which is also linking to the presentation of Michael. The problem is not the availability of data. There is plenty there. The problem is to get quality and an agreed taxonomy on top of the data so we can actually take decisions on top of it. So that takes us to the next slide. What can we then get from this? So of course, I'm SAP, so I come from the technology point of view, so I'm a little bit disappointed if I see a stat that states that still 45% of FP&A Trends professionals' time is spent on low value adding activities, data collection, data validation. And this is despite the availability of data technology over time. We've seen quite a number of trends in those 3 years. We see the data fabric architecture, more recently AI. There's a lot of options to make that better, but apparently this has not moved the needle. And it should, because there's quite a few good reasons to change this. If we look at the FP&A Trends Survey, it states that the respondents that report having a high quality of data compared to the ones that have a low quality of data, report to have a great forecast quality for 71% for best in class, compared to only 21% indicating a high quality forecast. So there's really more than enough reasons to go in this direction. Now, what can we do? So on the next slide, what we'll see is it's more of a proposal and also a change in mindset, where now in projects, I see a certain reluctance at times to involve a larger group when we're embarking on such a technology project. So basically what I would propose is reuniting finance and technology here. Because what we can see in the survey as well is that actually 49% indicate that data duties are purely assigned to finance. Only 10% involving IT. That's showing a way that we're kind of trying to keep it to ourselves. And then one could imagine that new technologies like AI could be the true enabler of these new data paradigms. But I would argue there's more to the story, and more to the story meaning AI is also a broad term. There's many capabilities for different types of personas. And to really get the most out of it, I would argue you need a team, just like Michael said. And I have a simplified view of it, but my simplified view is make sure that technology and finance are together in what we call, and the analysts are calling, fusion teams, bringing them together. So what can you concretely do? Getting to a conclusion here. On the next page, what would be my advice coming from the vendor perspective is if you're going to embark on such a project, if you're going to take decisions, what I would say to prevent regret, make sure it's not just finance, but also technology on the decision board. Together, equal parts, make that decision on what is the best fit. And I think this is relevant for many because we still see that the predominant planning tool is an individual spreadsheet tool. So definitely not collaboration between technology and finance. Now, if we have that team on the decision board, what should they ask, right? So the first thing, yes, AI is not the only answer, but it is a key technology that you need to make sure that the vendor is on top of. But on top of on all ends, meaning the ability to use AI within that platform solution, whatever it may be, to empower not just technology, but also the business. So different skill sets to be able to interact with that AI functionality. Next up, and I think this one is key, you need to make sure that data objects are not only owned either by the business or technology, they need to be shared. And with that, the same data object needs to be worked on, or the ability to enhance it or make it better from also both teams. So different skill sets. On one end, you might have die-hard coding, and on the other end, you might have simple drag and drop if we make it black and white. But we want to make sure that those teams are fostered to collaborate on the same objects. And then my final cue, what I would ask a vendor, modularity. So you need to make sure that whatever direction you're taking, it fits. So you might have some AI elements from a different stack that needs to fit. You might have connectivity to that one, and I'm doing this just to make fun of it, like multiple sources of truth, right? You need to make sure you connect to that. And finally, how do you bring the data back to actually execute on top of that? So that modularity is key to make sure that it fits in the landscape. And that would be my view on how we could tackle data quality, but I'm actually quite curious how the audience is doing. So I'm giving it back to you, Hans, for that.
Brilliant. Mike, Nick, thank you very much. A great presentation and a great way of linking the stat survey and of course giving us tips and tricks as to how we break that mold and how we can move forward. Let us look at how the audiences are doing by looking through our next polling question, which is all about what is the main barrier on your way to data-driven decision making? Shortage of relevant skill? Is it deficiency of proper analytical tools? So lack of analytical tools? Is it lack of leadership support? Or is it absence of data-driven culture? So please, if you can vote, what is the main barrier on your way to data-driven decision-making? Shortage of skills, lack of analytical tools, lack of leadership support, absence of data-driven culture itself. I'll give it another couple of seconds before I close it. I'll read it again. What is the main barrier on your way to data-driven decision-making? Shortage of relevant skills, deficiency of proper analytical tools, lack of leadership, and then finally absence of a data-driven culture. I'm now going to close it. Thank you very much for voting and share it. So what we can see is 11% because of skills, 53% because of analytical tools, 4% because of leadership support, and 32% absence of data-driven culture. And Nick, a quick insight from you here, please.
Yeah, so of course, I'm slightly disappointed that the absence of data-driven culture is a little bit higher than the survey itself, right? I was quite happy with that downward trend, but I think that is one of the key elements. And of course, number 2 makes me happy because, yeah, everyone, we can help with that. But I think it's an interesting way. Definitely, we see the value, and let's push for getting that culture right.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great insight there. Let me just hide this and let us come back to our question. So may I ask Michael as well to join us, please, Michael? And again, you know, this is another question that keeps cropping up again and again. Why is the adoption of AI ML in decline? It's been declining, albeit by only 1% or so over the last few years, but still, you know, from 9 to 6 now. So why is the adoption of AI and ML in decline, and what can we do about it?
Michael,
can I come to you for an answer on this one, please?
Yeah, sure. And I think a couple of things. I think AI ML has probably come over the hype cycle a little bit, or the hype a little bit, and I think it's kind of sort of coming down and sort of stabilizing a little bit. I think for a while everyone thought that everyone's going to race to new AI ML techniques and methods. But I will say that I think actually the industry is far more mature than most people think. I think it's much further along as a mature product than ever before. So I think we'll see steady usage of AI ML going forward for sure. And I think in many cases it starts with figuring out what use cases are the easier ones to start with and go after and build from there. Some can be more time consuming and tougher to achieve, and so it's just finding really where the right starting point is, where to really kind of bring those teams together and start to build traction on AI ML. But again, I definitely see it as a vastly maturing area with a lot of potential, and I think the future's bright.
Fantastic answer there. Thank you very much, Michael. And Nick, can I come over to you, please?
Yeah, definitely. So I would concur with Michael's point, right? I really like the view of the hype cycle, and I also think we're beyond the point of inflated expectations. It's been around a little bit longer than most people might have in their awareness. And what I think that we can do about it, right, as we're moving up, is AI used to be in the field of only data science in a certain corner of the company, and now it's becoming much broader, much more common space. And we should have more standardized cases to a certain extent. And what we need to do is we need to make sure we document those, we write them out, proven cases so people can follow along, and then you're in that regular bell curve of adoption, right? You get the majority in, you get them in by showing proof points of how it actually works. And it's one of our responsibilities, right, to bring those proof points to the larger audience.
Great point there. And of course, a lot of AI ML is already being embedded in some of the tools that we use as EPM and things like that. So that's another way. One of the key reasons, of course, we all talk about it, is the black box effect as well. It is one of the key reasons why people aren't adopting. But I think we are getting beyond that as well. So thank you very much for your answers, panelists. Just stay on the camera now. We go to our next session. But before that, let me just remind our audience, please keep sending your questions. We will answer some of them today. Those we can't answer, we will answer them directly to yourself via email anyway. So please keep sending it right till the end. Now, so before we go on the exciting Q&A, let me just go around and ask for a couple of conclusion points from each one of our panelists. So key conclusion from you, Michael?
Yeah, I think again just want to thank Hans and the FP&A Trends team for putting together such a great survey. I think it's a very comprehensive survey. I think it's interesting that we have seen a lot of demand and interest in data, and it's really just now carrying out that usage and getting that adoption. Again, as I proposed, I think there's some tricks and tips I think we can maybe use from our world. But I think we're on the way, and we'll see what next year brings.
Fantastic. Nick, your conclusion?
Yes, so similar to Michael again, right? Like this is always one of the highlights of the year when we read the survey, figure out how everything is. And we all related kind of to similar stats, right? With data-driven decision making. And I think we all caught it's on the upwards rise. So I would leave it on that positive note as we're taking it more and more serious. It's not the culture that's stopping us. And we just need to keep doing what we're doing. And we might make a slight change in how we collaborate within the larger company. Then I really see this as a positive future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your conclusions there. Great from both of you. Let us now go to our Q&A session. Before we go there, let me remind our audience again, please keep sending your questions. We will try and answer as many as we can. The others will be answered to you via email. So there was there's a question number one. When we were looking at the different stats as far as FP&A spending their amount of time, the question was, isn't AI improving those stats throughout the survey. And the answer there, and it's a question to myself, I guess, the answer is that yes, AI is driving those stats for the better. So if you are using AI, value-added activities increases by 5%. On the other side, if you're using driver-based planning, that drives value-added activities by an extra 12%. So yes, the use of technology and the use of technology properly does drive all of those stats to a better position. So less time in non-value add stuff. So that was to answer that. But my first question, of course, to the panelists is to Michael. And Michael, bear with me. Let me find the question. So we talk about data-driven decision-making. Where shouldn't it be better decision-making using data-informed? So informed data rather than data-driven. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it follows kind of that classic maturity method, right, that we've seen in the past, where you start with, just analyzing the past and then slowly working to predictive and then finally getting to prescriptive analytics. I think that graph that we've all seen in the past is still true today. I think I still focus a lot of that and a lot of the things we talk about, trying to get to more self-service, more predictive analytics. We have a whole framework for how we think about the different reports that we look at different stages. So I think it is trying to mature and get further along in that analytical maturity model. I think we're still the things that are kind of hanging on are still some of the challenges we've seen in the past: data structure, data quality. We have to solve those before we're going to get into some more of the advanced things. Even getting into things like self-service, where you can just do a lot of drag and drop and carve up the data in different ways for different audiences. But as we continue to build that foundation out and get good scores in those spaces, I think we'll start to move into the more advanced analytics, where it's really, really driving decision making for us. So the time spent doing the analytics is far less. I think it'll be interesting. I think if we talked again this time next year, it'd be interesting to see where we're going to get, because I think it's going to come really fast. But we just need to make sure we're doing the basics and the structuring of the data and the sound hard work first, the uphill challenges, and that will come very quick and very fast. And I think we'll be there, pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point there, Michael. And I think, of course, we talk about data-driven, but of course, it's all about data-informed. And at the end of the day, human intelligence is key in putting everything together. So that's great. Thank you very much. Fantastic answer there. Our question to Nick is around generative AI. Of course, we talk about AI. How is generative AI, and for the audience who don't use it, the likes of ChatGPT, going to change the face of FP&A is the question. Nick, please.
Well, generative AI and the more recent advancements of specifically large language models, so generating language, I think is a key thing to monitor, right? They have the ability to do data analysis. They have the ability within products to perform actions, right? If sufficient APIs are present, you can actually automate a large number of activities. They can also perform actions like my last forecast, give me a comparison to last year's surrounding data and how realistic is it. And that's the exciting stuff it can do. But I also want to put a caution in there that, what generative AI are you using and how is it training itself? So you need to be very careful from a company perspective to not use your personal generative AI, because that's actually not sound from a legal perspective to get your data to them and back if it's private company data. So you need to take a lot of care with using it, but when using it and infused in the products, it brings so much value to the practitioner trying to perform the optimal forecast, but also the technology backbone to automate a large number of the steps to get to that result faster. So different elements.
Nick, on that, I've got a question myself. Is of course we do have paid softwares like ChatGPT as well, where you can put your data, and as far as they're concerned, it is private, it doesn't go out there. How safe is that environment?
Well, you always have to look at the fine details, the fine print, right? And in those type of agreements with individuals, you will always have your data go over there. And yes, they're bound to restrictions, but I think every other week in the news, we read about a break and a breach. So that's one thing, but then even from a legal perspective, you are not covered. And that's what you see in individual agreements. And if you make agreements with vendors, then typically, if it's business to business, these type of things are blacked out. So for example, models that we as SAP also do not offer within our portal because they don't offer the capability to not bring the data there and leave it within the premise. That's a key element.
Wow, this is something important for all of us to watch out. We are very quickly running short of time. Can I just ask one general question to both of you anyway? We've seen 52% of organizations still using Excel as their planning tool. What can we do about it? Michael?
Yeah, I mean, Excel has been around for forever, right? It's been the quest we've tried to eradicate, I think, over the last 25 years of my business career for sure. I think it goes back to just setting that as a customer or business outcome. So let's reduce reliance on X by X% and really work towards that. Treat that as an outcome that you're working towards. You won't get rid of it. It won't be 0%. But can you reduce the reliance on that? Can you reduce the reliance on emails and things that are kind of more PDFs and things that are more static and move to more of a digital world? All those things, all those behaviors can be changed, but we can only, we're only going to do what we measure, and we have to start there.
Brilliant. Quick answer from you, Nick.
Yes, so I think the measuring is key, right? Else you won't move forward. And to get people there, I think the main area is Excel is highly flexible. You'll get to do whatever you like. And that flexibility, or at least some type of middle ground, needs to be offered for the user to work with. Because if you're not bringing any value in your solution, they will just do an export and get it back to Excel, right? You need to make sure there is value for the user to not do it in Excel.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, panelists, for answering those questions. Great questions indeed, and great answers. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some more questions which we will get answered straight to you via email. So panelists, just stay on there. What we've got a few more slides to go through. So of course, the FP&A Trends Survey, which I went through earlier on, you've got the QR code here, the link here as well, and you will be sent the link as well. Please download, digest, and read it thoroughly. And thank you for participating in helping that survey as well. So what do we have as next? We've got a bit of a break, I guess, for summer, and we come back in September. The next webinar we've got planned is on unveiling the potential of FP&A scenario management. So please put that in your diary, 25th of September 2024. Now, great time to say a big, massive thank you to our global sponsor, SAP, for helping us put this together. Thank you very much, SAP. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our two panelists, Michael and Nick, for an amazing presentations from both one of them, and of course, amazing insight for answering all of those questions. So panelists, thank you very, very much for being part of our webinar today. And most of all, let's thank all of the members for attending this meeting as well. I hope it has been really beneficial to you. This is how you guys can keep in touch with us. So please do follow us, do link in with us. Just to remind you, I'm just about to close the meeting. Do give us a couple of minutes and tell us how we did and what subject matter you would like to hear from us in the future as well. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say thank you very much for attending. Have a great morning, afternoon, and evening. Thank you very much, and goodbye, and see you in the next one. Goodbye. Bye-bye.